What if I told you that the financial anxiety keeping you up at 3 in the morning, the one that makes you feel like you're drowning while everyone else is swimming, has absolutely nothing to do with your actual bank account and everything to do with a psychological trap so effective that even millionaires fall into it? I'm Jade, and I spend way too much time studying why people who are objectively doing fine financially feel like they're failing at life, while people who should be panicking somehow feel completely secure. If you've ever looked at your finances and felt that sinking sensation that you're falling behind, even though you can't quite explain behind what or behind who, make sure you hit that subscribe button because what I'm about to show you is going to completely change how you see your financial situation. Here's something that's going to sound impossible until I prove it to you. The very fact that you feel behind financially is probably the strongest indicator that you're actually ahead. By the end of this video, you'll understand why your anxiety might be the best sign you've got going for you, and why the people who seem the most confident about their finances are often the ones in the most trouble. The invisible yardstick. Let me start with something that's going to make you uncomfortable. You're comparing your behind-the-scenes footage to everyone else's highlight reel, and you don't even realize you're doing it. Your Instagram feed shows you your friend's vacation in Bali, but it doesn't show you the credit card statement that came after. You see your coworker's new car in the parking lot, but you don't see the 7-year loan at 9% interest that made it possible. You're getting a completely distorted view of everyone else's financial reality, and your brain is using that distorted view as the measuring stick for your own success. But here's where it gets really insidious. The algorithm isn't neutral. It's specifically designed to show you content from people who appear to be doing better than you. Because that content generates the most engagement, envy drives clicks better than almost any other emotion, and the platforms know this. You're not seeing a random sample of how people are actually doing. You're seeing a carefully curated selection of people who want you to think they're crushing it, filtered through an algorithm that profits from making you feel inadequate. The research on this is pretty brutal. Surveys show that at every single income level, roughly the same percentage of people report feeling behind financially. People making $30,000 a year think if they just made $50,000, they'd feel secure. People making $50,000 think they need $80,000. People making $150,000 are convinced that $250,000 is the magic number. The goalpost moves at exactly the same speed as your progress, which means you can run your entire life and never feel like you're getting anywhere. This isn't a personal failing. This is called the hedonic treadmill, and it's a fundamental feature of how human brains work. We adapt to our circumstances incredibly quickly, and what felt like abundance 6 months ago feels like baseline normal today. The problem is that your brain adapts to improvements but doesn't adjust your expectations downward when you see other people doing better. You only notice the gap between where you are and where someone else appears to be. Here's something that almost nobody talks about because it makes people really uncomfortable. You're comparing yourself to people who are playing a completely different game with completely different rules. If you're a millennial trying to buy a house, you're comparing your progress to boomers who bought houses when they cost 3 times the average salary instead of 10 times. If you're looking at retirement savings, you're comparing yourself to Gen X who bought in after the 2008 crash and rode the entire recovery. The economic conditions that allowed previous generations to build wealth literally don't exist anymore in the same form. But somehow we're all still using the same scorecard. You're not behind, you're playing a harder game, and nobody's adjusting the par score to account for that. The manufactured anxiety industry. Now let's talk about something that's going to make you angry once you see it. There's an entire industry built around keeping you anxious about your finances, and your feeling of inadequacy is literally their business model. Scroll through financial content for 10 minutes and count how many headlines are designed to make you feel like you're failing. 10 things you should have done by age 25. How I saved $100,000 by 30. You're falling behind if you don't have these 5 accounts. Every single one of these pieces of content is engineered to create anxiety, because anxiety drives engagement and engagement drives revenue. The financial influencers sharing their success stories aren't lying exactly, but they're giving you a highlight reel that's missing some pretty crucial context. That person who retired at 28 from crypto gains, they're not showing you the 10,000 people who bought crypto at the same time and lost everything. That couple who paid off $100,000 in debt in 2 years. They're probably not mentioning the family members who let them live rent-free or the inheritance that made it possible. You're seeing survivorship bias in action, and your brain is treating these outliers like they're the normal standard you should be achieving. Here's where the arbitrary timelines come from that everyone treats like gospel. debt-free by 30, house by 35, retirement fully funded by 40. These numbers didn't come from careful economic analysis or research into optimal financial health. They came from people in completely different economic conditions, or from people selling you courses and coaching to solve problems they basically invented. The reason these timelines feel impossible isn't because you're behind, it's because they're based on circumstances that don't match your reality. The privilege and visibility is the part that really messes people up. When someone shares their financial success story, they almost never mention the safety nets and advantages that made it possible. They frame it as pure discipline and smart choices, conveniently leaving out the part where they could always move back home if things got bad, or the small gift from grandparents that was actually a $50,000 down payment, or the fact that their partner's income covered all the bills while they built their business. You're comparing your solo journey to their team sport and then beating yourself up for not keeping pace. The actual data versus your feelings. Let me give you some numbers that are going to completely reframe how you see your situation. If you have $1,000 in savings right now, you're ahead of 40% of Americans who can't cover a $400 emergency. If you've got $5,000 saved, you're ahead of 60%. If you have 3 months of expenses in an emergency fund, you're in the top 25%. The median retirement account balance for someone in their 30s is $12,000. If you've got $20,000, you're beating the median, but I bet you still feel behind because you're comparing yourself to the carefully curated success stories instead of actual statistical reality. The net worth data is even more revealing. The median net worth for someone at age 25 is actually negative because student loans. At 35, it's $35,000 total. Not per year, total net worth. If you're not deeply in debt, you're literally ahead of half your peers. But that doesn't feel true because the people who are struggling don't post about it. Financial failure is invisible. Financial success, even fake financial success, is everywhere you look. But here's what really matters, and this is going to sound like I'm moving the goalposts, but stay with me. The absolute numbers in your account matter way less than the direction you're moving and the systems you've built. Someone making $200,000 a year but saving 5% of it is in worse financial shape than someone making $50,000 and saving 20%. The high earner has a lifestyle that requires massive continuous income and no resilience. The modest earner has flexibility and compound growth working in their favor. But social media shows you the $200,000 lifestyle, not the fragility underneath it. The progress you're making is often invisible even to you. Avoiding debt doesn't feel like winning, but it's one of the most powerful financial decisions you can make. Consistent small savings seem boring compared to big dramatic moves, but compound interest doesn't care about drama, it cares about consistency. Learning financial literacy doesn't show up on your net worth statement, but it's a skill that will generate returns for the rest of your life. Building your credit score is silent, unglamorous work that creates massive opportunities later. Progress isn't always exciting. Sometimes it's just not going backwards while everyone around you is. The psychological traps making it worse. Here's something that's going to change how you consume financial advice forever. You're only seeing the people who succeeded. This is called survivorship bias, and it's absolutely destroying your ability to accurately assess risk and strategy. When someone tells you they bought crypto early and retired at 28, that's one data point. What you're not seeing is the 10,000 people who bought crypto at the same time, held through the crashes, and lost everything. The strategy didn't work for most people who tried it. You're just not hearing from them because failure doesn't go viral. The same thing happens with every financial strategy that gets popular. Real estate investing, day trading, starting a business, aggressive stock picking. You hear about the wins because people love sharing wins. You don't hear about the losses because people hide losses. This creates a completely warped perception where every strategy seems way more reliable than it actually is. And then you feel like a failure when you're not getting the same results as the cherry-picked success stories you're seeing. The optimization trap is sneakier because it disguises itself as being responsible. You start obsessing over finding the perfect budget categories, the optimal investment allocation, maximizing credit card rewards, achieving peak tax efficiency. These things matter, but the psychological cost of constantly trying to optimize often outweighs the marginal gains. The difference between a good financial plan and a perfect financial plan might be 3% over a lifetime. The stress of chasing perfection costs you more than that in health, relationships, and mental energy. I see people analyzing whether to save in a high-yield savings account at 4.5% versus 4.7% while completely ignoring the $200 a month they're spending on subscriptions they don't use. The optimization obsession is a distraction from the big, simple moves that actually matter. Here's a trap that catches almost everyone. You look backward at past you and feel regret, then you look forward at future you and feel hopeless. Why didn't I start investing at 22? I'll never catch up to where I should be. Both of these thoughts are useless and destructive. Past you didn't have the knowledge current you has. You're literally beating yourself up for not knowing something before you learned it, and future projections based on compound interest calculators showing what you could have had create this crushing sense of permanent disadvantage that paralyzes you from starting now. The milestone fixation is everywhere in financial content, and it's almost completely arbitrary. You need this much in savings by this age. Everyone your age owns a home. You should be making six figures by now. These milestones ignore your starting point, your geography, your values, and your specific circumstances. Someone who started with family wealth has a completely different timeline than someone who's first generation. Someone living in rural Ohio is playing a different game than someone in San Francisco. Someone who values experiences over accumulation is going to hit different milestones at different times. The only comparison that actually matters is whether you're better off than you were a year ago. The hidden signs you're actually ahead. Here's a paradox that's going to sound wrong until you think about it. If you feel anxious about money, you're probably in better financial shape than someone who doesn't. People who worry about their finances tend to track them, plan for them, and make adjustments when things aren't working. Apathy is way more dangerous than anxiety. The person who never thinks about money is the person who's going to get blindsided by a crisis they could have prevented. If you're stressed about being behind, it means you're paying attention. And paying attention puts you ahead of everyone who isn't. The fact that you track your spending, even if imperfectly, puts you in rare company. Most people have absolutely no idea where their money goes. They know roughly what they earn, and they have a vague sense that it all disappears, but they couldn't tell you how much they spent on food last month, or what percentage of their income goes to fixed expenses. If you know your numbers, even if those numbers aren't where you want them to be, you have awareness. Awareness is the first step to control. Amount matters less than the system. Let me tell you about some behaviors that predict financial success better than your current account balance. If you've automated your savings, even if it's just $20 a month, you've built infrastructure that most people never create. The system beats willpower every single time. If you research major purchases instead of impulse buying, if you understand how interest rates work, if you actually read the terms on financial products, these habits compound more powerfully than the money itself. If you can delay gratification, say no to purchases, wait for better deals, prioritize future outcomes over immediate pleasure, you have the skill that separates wealth builders from everyone else. Here's something that's going to flip your perspective on what financial success looks like. The things that look like success often aren't. That new car is probably debt. Those designer clothes are probably credit cards. That expensive apartment is probably paycheck to paycheck at a higher income level. Real wealth markers are almost invisible to social media. The boring, reliable car that's paid off, the unfashionable but steadily growing investment account, the modest lifestyle with a high savings rate. There's a reason the millionaire next door doesn't look like what you'd expect. The people with actual money rarely display it the way people pretend to have money do. The reframe that changes everything. The feeling of being behind comes from scarcity thinking, and scarcity thinking makes you stupid. When your brain believes resources are limited and you're not getting your share, you make reactive decisions instead of strategic ones. You take bad jobs because you're desperate. You make risky investments because you think you need to catch up fast. You miss actual opportunities because you're too focused on the gap between where you are and where you think you should be. The whole framework of behind and ahead implies there's a race with a finish line, but personal finance isn't a race. Everyone's finish line is different, and half the people who look like they're ahead are actually running in the wrong direction entirely. Let's talk about what ahead actually means, because the cultural definition is toxic. Biggest house, newest car, highest income, earliest retirement. This definition of success requires you to constantly acquire more and display it publicly, which is convenient for an economy that needs you to keep consuming. A healthier definition of financial success is decreasing stress over time, increasing options and freedom, growing net worth even if slowly, and living below your means by choice rather than necessity. The shift in how you talk to yourself matters more than you'd think. Instead of, why don't I have this much saved yet? Ask, am I making progress toward my actual goals, not the goals someone else decided I should have. The comparison detox isn't about positive thinking or pretending other people don't exist. It's about being strategic with what you allow into your mental space. Unfollow accounts that make you feel inadequate. Stop asking friends what they earn or save because that information doesn't help you. It just creates anxiety. Create personal benchmarks based on past you, not other people. Celebrate progress regardless of size because small, consistent progress beats dramatic, inconsistent moves every single time. The question isn't, are you where some article says you should be? The question is, are you 1% better this month than last month? Because 1% monthly improvement compounds to transformation. Here's the uncomfortable truth that nobody wants to hear. There will always be someone ahead of you. At every financial level, you can find someone doing better. Millionaires feel behind billionaires. This feeling never goes away if you let external comparison drive it. The feeling of being behind is a feature of how our economic system works, not a bug. Capitalism needs you to feel inadequate so you'll consume more. Social media needs you to feel less than so you'll engage more. The financial industry needs you anxious so you'll buy their solutions. Your financial anxiety is profitable to other people, and understanding that is the first step to freedom from it. The uncomfortable truth. Here's the paradox that's going to set you free. People who feel behind financially are often the ones who are actually ahead, because they're paying attention when most people aren't. They're self-aware enough to track their progress. They want to improve, which means they have a growth mindset. They're educating themselves, literally watching videos like this to understand their situation better. The fact that you care enough to feel behind is proof that you're the kind of person who won't stay there. The only comparison that matters is this one. Are you better off than you were this time last year? If yes, you're ahead by the only definition that matters. If no, you have actual data you can use to adjust course. That's it. That's the whole game. Not are you ahead of your college roommate or your cousin or some stranger on the internet. Are you moving forward in your own life? Being behind is a manufactured illusion created by survivorship bias, social media curation, marketing algorithms, invisible privilege, and arbitrary timelines that don't account for your specific reality. You're not behind. You're playing a different game than the people you're comparing yourself to, with different starting points and different obstacles and different definitions of winning. The race you think you're losing doesn't actually exist. If this changed how you see your financial situation, hit subscribe because I make content about the psychology of money and why our brains make this stuff so much harder than it needs to be. The real truth is this: the only person you need to be ahead of is who you were yesterday. And if you're even slightly better than that, you're winning.